Hey guys, what's up? This is Shao Style. I got another video here for you. So recently I made a video about why I chose the graphics cards that I did for my PC build, right? Now for my build that I did with Paul, originally I was gonna max out the RAM to 128 gigabytes, right? However, because my budget ran out, I was only able to get 64 gigabytes of RAM. And also the CPU that Paul was going to let me borrow at the moment was a 5820K. And the thing is, with that CPU, it's only able to handle 64 gigabytes of RAM. After a while, I was able to save up my money and I was able to upgrade to the 6800K CPU. And yeah, it's a really cool CPU. But the main thing about this CPU is simply is able to handle the 128 gigabytes of RAM. And in this video, I want to talk about why I want to go with that amount of RAM. I got a little animation here going, and this is a little cartoon smoke effect that I'm working on. I'll be making a tutorial on how to make this soon, but for the time being, this scene is a particle system. So the reason why I have the MSI Afterburner here is to show that in my graphics card, nothing is being stored into the VRAM. Now I got 3 monitors going, so already a gigabyte is being used in my graphics card, right? So at the moment, as you can see here, this green line pretty much indicates that a image file has been created and is being played off the memory. So if you actually go to the Adobe page and look up about memory and storage and whatnot, and pretty much right here I'll tell you about the RAM requirements for rendering and whatnot. Pretty much the way how it works is when you do a RAM preview or when you're rendering out a video or image sequence from your composition here, pretty much what it does is that I'll go layer by layer, and then from there I'll create an image sequence, and then I'll move on to the next frame and I'll go layer by layer to render everything together. I'll create an image sequence of that, and it goes on and on and on. Now in this case, pretty much if you want to do what's called a RAM preview, create an image sequence and it temporarily stores it into your memory, into your RAM storage, right? So at the moment I'm using about 20 gigabytes of RAM inside my 64 gigabytes of memory that I have built into my computer at the moment. Yeah, so basically it doesn't render out a final image file. It creates temporary image files that get stored into your memory here, right? So that's basically what's being played back. This is only a 30-second composition, and as you can see, it's taking up almost like 20 gigabytes of RAM. The reason why it's taking up a lot of RAM is because this image sequence that you're seeing, this video file, is raw. It's not compressed whatsoever, so it's playing back an image sequence that's raw. So that's kind of like another thing to keep in mind if you want to start doing more complex stuff inside of After Effects. So just so you know, I got it's a square image composition, 1080, 24 frames per second. The duration is 30 seconds long. All right, so just to kind of reset everything, say if you want to clean out your memory here, pretty much what you can do is you go to Edit, you go down to Purge, and you go Purge all memory. And as you can see, it went from 20 gigabytes that got used up into from your memory, and it goes down to 7 gigabytes. Now, there's a blue line here. Pretty much this is indicating that there's a cache file that's similar to what you have here already. So if I was to do a RAM preview of this, yeah, so I was able to do a RAM preview faster because it already got stored into the cache. So since it's similar, nothing's different. Pretty much, it just reused the old cache files that I created. So, however, if I add something new to it, say like an adjustment layer with an effect into it, as you can see, it gets grayed out, so it has to create a new cache file from this this composition, right? It still says that 20 gigabytes of RAM is being used, right? So this is why it's important to making it a habit to purge your memory. Go to Edit, Purge all memory. So if you're working with a limited amount of memory, pretty much you want to make it a habit to purge your memory every now and then, because there'll be any type of data from your composition of After Effects still stored into your memory. So when you're working, they may slow you down. So same thing before you render, you want to make sure you clean out your memory by going to Edit and Purge. So little trick there. All right, so I added the adjustment layer and it has a sharpen effect. So pretty much what I want to show you is how much RAM gets used as it's processing an image file inside this composition in After Effects. So you can go half, third, or quarter resolution, but me mainly I like to work in full because I usually use a lot of colors and glows and whatnot. So I want to make sure I see exactly what I'm working with, so I always keep everything in full. But depending on what you're doing, you can lower down the resolution if you're limited on memory storage, right? So I'm gonna hit RAM preview. As you can see, my CPU just skyrockets to 100% and starts working, but I want to focus more on the memory usage. So I went from let's say 8 gigabytes that was being used, and as you can see here, it's going up to so far 35%, and it's only 4 seconds in. And it just keeps going and going and going. Yeah, it's reaching the 8-second mark, and already 50% of RAM is getting used. So yeah, I'm just gonna play this out just so you can have a real-time look at how much memory is being used. Now I do have some RAM set aside for the rest of my applications, and I'll get into that in a bit, right? So because I have about 10 gigabytes, set aside for my other applications, it kind of plateaus around 64%. I mean, it should reach up to 70%, but like, it gets to a point where it gets like, like this. And I think it's like once it kind of like plateaus a bit, like the RAM preview slows down a lot, and like from the beginning, it picked up all quick. However, once it gets to like a certain point, it takes longer to like create the RAM previews for each frame. So depending on how much RAM you have, once it plateaus, it pretty much, it kind of does slow down creating the preview files. And as you can see, nothing's happening to my graphics card because this is all being stored inside of the computer RAM. As you can see, using 70% of the 64 gigabytes of RAM built into my computer, it's almost done. And once it's finished doing the RAM preview, it's gonna drop significantly. As you can see, it did right there. So yeah, so it needs a good amount of RAM space, so After Effects to do whatever it needs to do. That way it can like process the layers they have inside of your composition here. It creates the image data that's going to be temporarily stored inside of your RAM. And as you can see here, we started around 8 gigabytes of RAM use, and now it's up to 18 gigabytes of RAM use right now. Yeah, it plays back, with no problems and smoothly. But again, like I'm saying, pretty much what you're seeing here is being played back directly from your RAM. This is not a render, like a final render or nothing. This is basically an image file or a video file that is being stored temporarily inside of your RAM. There are videos that talks about, the speed of the RAM, if it makes a difference, because there's some RAM that supposedly goes faster and whatnot. Honestly, my guess is it may make a difference, but how much, I'm not sure, right? Because depending how much the frequency or the speed of the read and writes of your RAM, that way After Effects is able to create its image sequence created inside the RAM and be able to play back. It may affect on how fast your RAM is, right? But again, how much, I'm not sure. I would just suggest go with what you're able to at the moment. Now, because I wanted to go with 128 gigabytes of RAM, I had to move up to, I guess, what is referred to as enthusiast motherboards, right? These are like the highest motherboards that are available at the moment, right? Because you need a certain like a CPU socket and a certain motherboard that's able to handle all the RAM and to transfer power and all the good stuff, right? Through Paul, I was able to get the Gigabyte Ultra Gaming motherboard. Now, one of the main things I like about this motherboard is pretty much it has this reinforcement of the graphics card socket here. Depending on how big your graphics card is and how heavy it is, you can start getting a sag on your graphics card. Now, Paul previously he let me borrow one of his computers. Yeah, you can see here the computer's GTX 67. You can see there's a lag there. So when I had this computer, this is something I had in mind. That's why it's kind of important for me when I got the motherboard to have this kind of reinforced GPU socket. But there's plenty of other motherboards you can check out, to get whatever to fit your needs. Another reason why I wanted to get a high amount of RAM for my computer is basically I want to start doing more animations. And as you can see here, this animation I did a long time ago. I made it using a 2010 27-inch iMac that had only 2.8 gigahertz, an Intel Core i5, and 16 gigs of memory. And that was, 1333 megahertz of DDR3, right? And the memory speed that I have now is 2400 megahertz. So there is a difference. So all this talk about does RAM speed matter? I'm gonna say yes, but again, by how much I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure it does help. But yeah, like I said, I'll just go with whatever your computer needs. In my case, my motherboard is suggested to get DDR4, and that's what I got. DDR4. So yeah, these animations took a long time, and the whole thing was done in After Effects. And yeah, the layers and layers they had in this animation was a lot, because each little thing that you saw, the character, my friend here, each explosions, the gunshots or whatever. Yeah, everything was done in After Effects in one composition, right? So the timeline was very, very, very big. Now, if you're not into doing a lot of animations or crazy stuff, with After Effects, if you want to do, simple explosions or whatnot, then chances are you're not going to need so much memory for your computer, right? And it's important to to know how much memory you think you're going to use with your computer, because all that dictates on what kind of motherboard you're going to get, and same thing with the CPU, right? And because the motherboard that I got is able to handle 128 gigabytes of RAM, then obviously I needed to get a CPU that's able to handle 128 gigabytes of RAM, which is why I went with the 6800K processor, right? And the reason why I got the 6800K and not the 6850K is simply because I was able to get this CPU under $500. And as I mentioned in my GPU video, I kind of like capped myself off that any computer component I get, I won't spend more than $500, right? So the CPU was under $500, and then I got it. Like I said, by the time my CPU burns out or something happens to it, then more down the line, I'm pretty sure the next $500 CPU will be way better than what I have now, because that's just how technology works. One more thing before I go. If you go to Edit, you go down here to Preferences and Memory Multiprocessing. Now, when I first started using After Effects, I used to like maxed out how much RAM is available for my Adobe software, right? I pretty much maxed out all the CPUs and RAM for my Adobe software to use. Now, that's not a good idea. The reason being is because obviously you got a lot of other stuff going on in the background. You know, I got my web browser, I got multiple applications open and so on. So you got to make sure you reserve enough RAM in the background for all those software applications to work in the background without any interruptions. The same thing with the CPUs, right? You gotta make sure you leave some CPUs to work in the background, because if not, then pretty much your computer is gonna start to struggle, and you're gonna create like a bottleneck because all the RAM and CPUs is being used with Adobe, and you know you're not leaving anything for your computer, your OS or whatever, to work in the background properly. So something to keep in mind. So there's a lot of videos about entry-level X99 builds. You know, that way you can get the motherboard, you can build the computer, and then whenever you're ready or save up the money, you can buy the rest of your, RAM and then the CPU or whatever. So definitely, look that up on YouTube. So, all right, this video is getting long enough, so I'm gonna end it here. Hopefully, it helps you out in one way or another, and it kind of gives you a better understanding why someone like me needs 128 gigabytes of RAM built into my computer. So, yeah, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. Take care and peace.